My 34 male wife 30 female left me after 5 years of marriage for another man. After a few weeks of living together, he mentally, emotionally, and physically abused her. She left him and now doesn't want to move forward with our divorce. I found out about a month and a half ago that my wife of 5 years had been having an affair with a man she had dated back in high school. After I found out, she apparently decided our relationship wasn't worth trying to fix and moved in with him. We don't have any children, so I immediately began divorce proceedings. My wife's new relationship disintegrated quickly. My buddy is cop, and within 2 weeks of her moving in with me, he was telling me they were getting calls nearly every night from the neighbors with reports of them screaming at each other, hitting each other, etc. It all came to a head a week ago. They got into a huge argument, and he ended up beating her so badly she had to go to the hospital. He was arrested, she got a restraining order, and the relationship is over. My wife came back to live at the house. She asked me to stay there as well, because she didn't feel safe. I agreed, though I am now staying in the spare bedroom. She seems to now think that because I am helping her recover, and we're both staying in the house, this is a chance for us to rekindle our relationship. She doesn't want to move forward with the divorce. I have no desire to rekindle our relationship. I want to help her recover, and I want her to be safe, but the betrayal I feel is something I don't think I can ever forgive. My family thinks I'm being heartless. The first time she dated this man, he was also abusive. He's much older than her. My sister says that my wife cheated on me because this guy manipulated her when she was young and now she's brainwashed by him. I don't want to be, and my wife was a victim. Which is why I want to do whatever I can to get her back on her feet. But I still want a divorce. She would tell me she was taking her mother to the doctor when she was going to this random guy's house during a pandemic and cheating on me. I can't get that out of my head. But my family just keeps telling me that we have to get through this together. My mother keeps telling me that this was the worst part of our vows. This wasn't what I had in mind when I said them. Am I being heartless? Story 2. I, 25 male, caught my wife, 24 female, cheating 4 days ago. In order to add some perspective, my wife and I met when we were around 10 years old and fell in love. Our feelings for one another have existed since we were children, but it wasn't until we were 18 that they developed into something serious. I knew she was head over heels in love with me, and I knew she was head over heels in love with me, so the only logical next step was marriage. On Valentine's Day, when we were both 21, I proposed to her over a weekend getaway, and the rest, as they say, is history. We both have decent occupations, nice, well-kept homes, no children, a nice group of friends, and polite families, which allows us to make ends meet. Everything, in my perspective, was excellent. When I was looking through her phone, I came across the evidence of her infidelity. I spotted her sending SMS to a man from her place of employment. Despite the fact that this was not overt flirtation, it struck me as strange and provocative. During the course of the day, he would say things like, "I've had such a long day at work," and she would say things like, "I've had such a long day at work." I'll confess that I have a short fuse, and I was not about to let this happen to anyone. Then I told her that she couldn't contact him in any way, that she couldn't keep him from seeing me, and that she wouldn't have me if she attempted to do so. She completed all of the tasks I assigned of her. This brings me to the evening of Sunday. My cousin and I own and operate a small business together. We created it when we were 20. My workload becomes too much for me to cope with. I usually order in and get the work done, and if it's too late, I'll go to bed to sleep it off the next morning. My wife received a text message from me around lunchtime that said, in part, "Me and cousin are likely going to be kept here all night. I'll order in so you can dine without me and don't have to wait up." You have my heartfelt admiration. I received an email from her minutes later in which she expressed regret that she would be unable to visit me that evening, but she wished me luck with my work and expressed her love for me as well. Everything appeared to be in order. Think about what you did late that night. I came to the conclusion that work had taken up too much of my weekend and that I needed to see my wife, who I imagined was equally interested in seeing me. So, around 7 p.m., I started walking back to my apartment. My wife and the stranger were upstairs when I arrived home, and I couldn't make out what they were saying. I went up and saw them both. I admit that I didn't do the best job I could have done with the situation. I started by slapping him in the face while he tried to say, "Look, dude, I'm sorry." I tossed him out and told him he'd have to go home without his shoes because I didn't trust him. My wife was hysterical from the moment I walked in the door, and I was on the verge of becoming violent with her, but I refrained. Even though she shouted and sobbed during the ordeal, swearing that it was all a mistake. My fears from the text conversations had been confirmed. I reminded her on a regular basis that she needed to conserve her energy and that I didn't want to hear any of her nonsensical explanations. I contemplated returning to the workplace, but I decided against it, asking her to gather her belongings and go wherever she could. I wanted her out of my sight. I was right. Since then, she has remained in the company of her best friend. Since then, her friends and relatives have bombarded me with phone calls, but I've chosen to ignore them. I did, however, notify her father of the events that had transpired. He was enraged and decided to side with me. My wrath has given way to sadness at the realization that our almost lifelong journey has been thrown away for some unscrupulous individual from her employer since the very first day of her employment. I've managed to keep myself occupied, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't spent every spare time sulking, crying, and moaning about what had transpired. I'll be contacting divorce attorneys first thing in the morning tomorrow to begin the divorce procedure. Update. Okay, so a lot has happened since my last post. Please accept my apologies in advance for the length of this one. Aside from that, I'd like to convey my appreciation for everyone's remarks on the first post. Since the first post, I've accomplished quite a few things. It was discovered that I had an STD, and everything was good. For the time being, I have transferred ownership of my business to my business partner, a relative. I have terminated her phone contract, which I had paid for. I have taken down all of her images. I have packed all of her clothes, and I have had an encounter with someone. So please allow me to begin. It was a relief when my STD test came back negative, but it wasn't enough to make me feel better. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The situation continued to annoy me despite the positive results. I couldn't forget about it since she and her buddies were constantly ringing my phone and causing it to go off. I ultimately made my way to her home to meet with her folks. The attempt by her mother to reintegrate me into the family failed because her father recognized that I was set in my ways and was dissatisfied with his daughter. This occurred approximately 2 days after the original post. I like her father, and I believe we'll stay in touch because we're both straightforward men who understand one another's perspective. My admiration for him has always been strong, and it's a shame that his daughter is stopping me from officially being his son. I didn't respond to her friends, who had contacted me more times than I could count in the previous week. Because I spent so much time with my friends and family, it was a big assistance. In the afternoon, I invited a friend to my place, where we spent a couple of hours shooting her and removing all of her stuff from the house. This was quite relaxing for me, and it gave me the impression that I was erasing a stain from my life. It turned out to be significantly more effective than I had imagined. Divorce proceedings have commenced, but I am concerned that I will have significant difficulties getting her to sign the necessary forms and so on. I've already signed away my ownership interest in my company, so she won't be able to get her hands on it. As you all requested, I've avoided all communication with the exception of legal counsel. I contemplated whether or not to use the man's wife as leverage in the event that he attempted to bring charges against me. I laid hands on him when I caught him in my home. Finally, I reasoned, why not, and messaged her on Facebook. She responded immediately. She initially believed me, but later stated that he informed her that this was a lie. Simply displaying the doorbell footage of him approaching and being let out without his shoes was all I needed to do to convince her to believe me. No way in hell do I believe he is still happily married. It's time to move on to the next chapter. My mother assumed that I would like attending the Christmas party at her place of employment. Because I hadn't gotten out since the incident and needed a break, I decided to go for it. I went and was introduced to the daughter of one of her coworkers, which was a pleasant surprise. We struck up a conversation and left the party together, but we did not go out that evening. Our friendship began when she visited us a couple of nights before Christmas Eve. It took us numerous attempts to get her up, and she ended up staying for 2 nights. Despite the fact that she is not a love-at-first-sight alternative for my wife, she is a pleasant woman who is undoubtedly keeping me company at a time when I most need it. Because I'd been spending Christmas with my so for a while, it was more difficult than I anticipated, but having my family around me, feeding and watering me, made a significant difference. In general, I believe I'm coping significantly better than I anticipated with my situation. I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone who has reached out to me, everyone who has left a kind comment, and everyone who has been through a similar scenario and has managed to remain strong throughout at Story 3. Caught my wife 24 female of 2 years about to cheat with my 30 male best friend 30 male. To try and make this as short as I can, first a little background info. I met my wife, let's call her Jess, 6-7 years ago. Been friends never anything more until we both got out of really bad relationships. We were there for each other and all that. We became closer and eventually started dating. Dated for a little over a year. Then she got pregnant. We had a boy and decided to get married shortly after. Everything was going well. I know we were both at fault. I had trust issues after we had been together for a while. She told me about her past and her last 2 BFs she cheated on. I completely trusted her up to that point, and that shook me, but I tired to not let it affect anything. Jess has a long history of depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, along with being raped by her uncle. These were things that I was helping her with while seeing a therapist. To my part of the downfall of all of this, my family has a long history of depression, never knew any of this until just a couple nights ago. I never knew it was getting worse with me cause everyone chalked up my personality, changing to the fact I work 2 jobs, 6 days a week. My wife really only works weekends, occasionally a few hours during the week. I am currently seeking help dealing with it and getting over her past. Now for my friend Tim. Long before me and Jess ever got together, Tim made many attempts to come between Jess and her BF at the time. Jess shot him down and blocked his phone number and all social media. I never knew any of this until after me and Jess were together. When we have BBQs or gatherings, Tim would always be standoffish and ignore her. When we announced that Jess was pregnant, the only thing he had to say was, "Need a coat hanger." He then followed that up by talking to everyone about Jess. We had a blow-up and never spoke for just under 2 years. Come last Xmas, he wrote us both apology notes, and we sat down and talked, sorted everything out. Now Tim has been known to get in between relationships. Happened at least twice now. I told Jess that I've known Tim since I was 6. He's not over you. As time goes over the next 3-4 months, my workload increases a lot. This took time away from me and my wife, which Tim took up that opportunity to talk more to Jess. I started having issues with it when she would be ill till 12 a.m., talking him and texting him nonstop all day, ignoring our son. I told her after looking at the phone bill and seeing that she's texted him 1,500 times in 4 days that things need to change. They never did. Wherever we went, she would be right there texting him. My suspicions grew that this was more than friendly talking until last night, when they went out together for driving lessons with my wife that would take only a couple hours. They left at 2, and by the time 10 p.m. came around I got suspicious. I used the Find My iPhone app and saw where they had parked the car, a known spot to up at. So I decided to investigate. Opened up his car door, and they were both naked in his back seat. I'd gotten there right before anything worse happened. On cops come, I tell Tim to stay away and never contact any of us again. We go back home, wife feels like, and is a mess. I'm lost and not sure what to do. I told her we will do marriage counseling and see a therapist for each of us. This turned out longer than I wanted, but the venting helps. I guess right now, I just want outsider's perspective. I love my wife still, but is this worth fixing?